Welcome to the Kindle Chronicles, the Friday podcast all about your Kindle. I'm Len Edgerly. Today is December 29th, 2017. Welcome from downtown Denver, where we are settling in after returning here from Boston on Christmas night. I still got a touch of this congestion, but I think my voice is a little stronger than last week. Hope so. While we were gone, a neighbor's remodeling project inadvertently cut our Comcast cable here in our high-rise building, so we are without service for a while. I managed to connect to a nearby Xfinity Wi-Fi hotspot from my study long enough for a Skype conversation with Katie Ernst, author of an Alexa-powered interactive storytelling skill named Select a Story. A writer herself, Katie has done some nuanced thinking about what makes an interactive story succeed.
An interactive story is essentially a series of interlocking short stories.
That Xfinity Wi-Fi hotspot from somewhere nearby in downtown Denver appears to be working well enough to put the show together tonight and upload it to the nets. It's kind of a thin strand that I've got connecting me with the internet, and I hope it's going to work. I'm going to switch the order of the show today and save the news until the end instead of starting with it. The short version of the news is that Amazon and Alexa had a terrific holiday season, but you probably knew that already. With that, let's start with the tech tips. The first tech tip comes from Richard Lopez, who responded to my voice predicament on the last show and my inability to figure out a way to have Alexa help me out. Richard wrote, "Merry Christmas, Len. While Alexa may not read your Kindle docs yet, if your voice is going out, you can still send your script to Kindle. Then, using a Fire tablet, use the text-to-speech feature to read your show. I suspect well, now that's my great-grandfather Skelton's clock, which you haven't heard for 6 months, chiming 8 o'clock in the evening, and I love that sound. I'm leaving it on during the recording. I can hear it ticking, and if you find that sound sort of detracts from listening to the show, please drop me an email to let me know. It may be some kind of a quiet background that's okay. I think I've done it in the past, but maybe I've got a more sensitive microphone. Richard was saying he suspected Darlene would appreciate escaping the duty of reading the show in lieu of the Fire reading the script. By the way, with the Fire, he says, you can also choose the gender and national accent. How would you like the podcast read with a female Australian accent? Have a great holiday, Richard Lopez. Well, I think this is a brilliant suggestion, and I am going to give my recovering voice a rest by implementing it in a couple of different accents, beginning with Nicole, who is the female Aussie that Richard mentioned. Over to you, Nicole.
Thanks, Len. As you discovered this afternoon, you can convert a Word document to Kindle format and, using the Send to Kindle app on your Mac or PC, transfer it to your Fire HD10, which has a better speaker than the HD8. Good choice.
Well, I may be biased, but I prefer Alexa's voice to Nicole's here. I had her speaking a bit more of the tech tip, but I think I'm going to take over for in hopes of making it as listenable as possible here, even with my weakened voice. So I found that voice in settings on my Fire by tapping on keyboard and language, and then on text-to-speech. There was a choice for download additional voices, and that brought up a ton of choices. There was one that could speak Danish, a man and a woman, and then Turkish voice. There was Gwyneth or Gayant speaking Welsh. Each of the languages had a name of the person that was doing the text-to-speech. Once you tap on any of those voices, it becomes the default for text-to-speech. I sent the text tips document that I created in Word by tapping on the icon for it, which showed up on my Fire's home screen thanks to Send to Kindle. When the text was displayed, there was a play button at the bottom of the screen, and sure enough, I could give my voice a rest and listen to Nicole reading the script. Here's another example of a voice in text-to-speech. I'm not sure why these are feeling so robotic compared to Alexa. I'm sure Amazon is bringing the full force of its ability to make the voice sound more human to the Alexa platform, and when it gets to text-to-speech on the Fire, it's certainly not as listenable as what we're used to from the Echo and the other devices. But here is here's another voice, and you'll be able to tell which accent is being spoken.
The second tech tip is an update for Amazon's increasingly handsome interface for fetching your notes and highlights in a Kindle book. The latest update, which Len discovered in answering a query from a listener, Stephen Jones, is available at read.amazon.com/notebook.
That's the voice described as Brian from GBR, Great Britain, or the UK, and it must be kind of an American thing that the sound of a British accent, it just makes me want to listen, that there's some authority that comes with that accent, and there's a lot of history behind that response to it, but I do enjoy listening to it. You might not have caught the website that he was talking about. It's read.amazon.com/notebook, singular, not notebooks. And that's the way you get to annotations and highlights that you've made in your Kindle books. I happened to check this out because I was answering a question from Stephen Jones, and there seems to have been an update since the last time I did it, because it really looks sharp now. The books that you've highlighted all appear on kind of the left margin with photos of their covers, so it's a very bright, easy to look at queue of your books, and then you can also search for a book by title or author. And then to the right, you click on one of those books, and then you see all of the highlights that you made for that book. In your browser, if you just go to print, the print page won't show the titles of the books. It'll just show the annotations from the particular book that you're looking for. This has really come a long way since the early days when I found it so difficult to find books and then get my annotations. It just couldn't be easier now and more attractively designed. Stephen reminded me about the My Clippings file, which is still on the e-ink Kindles, and that's a little different because every time you do an annotation on one of the e-ink Kindles, like the Oasis or the Paperwhite, it's capturing them across books. So that file, if you were doing a couple of highlights in one book and then you switch to another book, the My Clippings file is just sort of a running list of what you've made notes about and highlighted. That could be useful in some kinds of research, I guess. So it's kind of an alternate way to track your highlights. The way you get at them isn't as handy because you would have to sideload that text file to your computer, and then you might want to edit it, make it handy for you, and then print it out. One thing I would dearly love to see is for the annotations and notes and highlights to be available for non-Kindle store books. At this point, this only works for a book that you bought at the Kindle store. How terrific would it be if you could do it for books that you get from Project Gutenberg or other sources, and also especially for Word documents that you make on your own computer and then you would like to be reading on your Kindle devices and highlighting and making notes. Or I do a lot of editing for a friend of mine who's a writer, and she sends me the Word documents, and now when I annotate on it while I'm reading them, I have to one by one copy my comments over into an email, and it would be fantastic to be able to capture those notes and annotations as easily as I can now with what I make on the Kindle books at read.amazon.com/notebook. Time now for the interview. Katie Ernst is an attorney, anthologist, and novelist who has just released an Alexa-powered interactive story skill named Select a Story. If you'd like to try it, enable the Alexa skill named Select a Story, then say, Alexa, open Select a Story to hear Cinder/Charming. That's the first of a planned series of stories for Alexa, and a little later these will be also available on Google Play. Actually, let's try that. I've got my Echo Show here, and I want to just play you the opening of what it sounds like. Alexa, open Select a Story.
Welcome back to Select a Story. Would you like to finish your last story or begin a new game?
Begin a new game.
You open your eyes after what was supposed to be a quick nap. You're in the woods. You're back against a tree. You look up, and the sun is on the other side of the sky. Where am I? You wonder. You shake your head to clear it. You're in the royal forest. You stand up and brush dirt and leaves off your clothes. You shouldn't have been napping out here where anyone can see you. You need to get home. But where is your home? Is it the palace or a modest cottage?
Alexa, stop.
Thanks for playing. Please visit us at selectastory.com.
At that juncture of saying whether you live in a castle or a cottage, you're choosing whether you're going to be Prince Charming or Cinderella in this story. I reached Katie at her home just outside of Philadelphia on Wednesday, December 27th. It's always fun for me to hear the genesis stories for startups and other creative endeavors. In the case of Select a Story, an inadvertent invoking of Alexa at a party opened a door to a whole new world for Katie Ernst and her husband, who has programmed the skill.
About 4 months ago, I was having a party and I needed speakers to play music, and I thought, hey, these Echo things, whatever they are, they seem kind of cool and they're cheap. I'll buy one of those and then I can play music at my party. And after people had left, my brother and I were sitting and talking, and we somehow accidentally opened what I later learned was the magic door. And it had just overheard us talking and thought we had, said, Alexa, open the magic door. So, it just said, you're in the woods and, what do you want to do? And we're like, what? We're like, we'll go this way.
What's the magic door? Is that a skill that tells a story?
Oh, yes. Okay. So the magic door is one of the most successful skills on Alexa, and it's had over 1 million users. And yeah, it's basically an interactive story.
Alexa, open the magic door.
In front of us is a land of adventures. We can explore this land together. Ooh, it feels spooky around here this week.
It's produced by a husband and wife team. The husband codes everything and the wife writes it. But as far as I know, and I haven't spoken to them personally, I don't think she has any publishing background or writing background per se. So we kind of had this magical experience of not knowing what happened. I Googled it. I found out about the magic door. And then the next day I said to my husband, hey, let's try this out. This is really cool. I'm like, you're going to love it. It's amazing. And we sat down and we started playing it. And I realized that, well, the choices aren't really real choices. It'll say, do you want to go here or do you want to just go back to the beginning, essentially, much of the time. It's not really, do you want to do A or B? It's really, do you want to do A or do A? I thought, well, this is such a great concept, but I really feel like I could improve upon the execution, and that's not in any way to put down the magic door because I think it's a great thing. So I thought, well, let me see if I could sit down and write one of these. So I had a slow week at work, and I wrote one story in about a week. And a story is about 30,000 words, which is about half of an adult-length novel. So for me, that's really I write fast anyway, but usually I can't keep myself engaged that long to write, that many hours in a day. I thought, oh, this is really fun. And so we started looking into creating that skill. And then soon thereafter, Amazon announced that they would now allow you to make skills for children, and also that they were having this competition where you could potentially win up to $25,000. And I thought, oh, that's really the direction, because kids love these devices, and, the Choose Your Own Adventure books from when I was young are always really big with children. The contest from when it was announced to when you need to have your entry is only slightly over 2 months. And so to write a story, code it, have it voice narrated by someone narrating it, we needed to move fast. So I had to write another story in about a week, and then we moved from there. So we just got it up on Amazon 8 days ago.
Are you able to see reports that tell you how many times people have listened to it?
Yeah, so in the last 8 days, we've had almost 200 users, and we've had like 1,800 utterances, which is, the number of times the person speaks to the device. So that would indicate that the average user is getting through the story one time, because each story, on average, when you go through it, each scene is about a minute. To go through one story, you will get anywhere between 10 to 20 scenes, depending on which path you choose. So, and we've had quite a number of repeat users as well. About a third of our users to date were just today. I mean, we're actually kind of increasing exponentially, and given that I haven't promoted it at all yet, and the main reason that we really wanted to enter this Amazon contest is because if you are a finalist, then they'll promote you. That really is going to hopefully propel us forward to where people will learn about this skill and want to use it. But I've been very happy with the number of the engagement once people do find the skill.
What's the premise of the story?
The first story that I wrote is called Cinder Charming, and the idea is that you can play as either Cinderella or Prince Charming, and you can go on a number of adventures as either character. So as Cinderella, you can either try to find your father's will to prove that the estate really belongs to you instead of your evil stepmother, or you can, go the more traditional route and try to win the prince's heart. And as Prince Charming, you can try to find a wife, or you can set off an adventure and try to find capture a dragon's egg, which is what you really want. And that's in fact why you're trying to find the wife in the story, is because the kingdom needs money, and so it's a way of you getting money so that you can get a dragon egg that way. The
contest is for kids 13 and under. Were you picturing a child of 10 to 13 as the main audience for this?
Yeah, I would say that's definitely the age range. My niece, who actually appeared in the video that we had to make for the contest, she's 9, and she came over to our house to shoot the video. She'd never played the skill. I hadn't told her anything about it. And after we shot the video of her using it to, demonstrate it, she said, Aunt Katie, can I keep playing? I said, well, if you want to, sure. And she spent the next hour until she had to go home playing it, and she absolutely loved it. And that was the most heartening thing that I've seen, because she would have had no problem telling me if she didn't like it, and she certainly wouldn't have asked to keep playing if she didn't like it. So I definitely think it is the sort of, I hope it's the sort of writing that will appeal to children. In future, I won't always be the author. The idea is that it'll become a platform where many authors can produce content, and each author's story will be individual, obviously, and can be of different genres, but of course all aimed at the same age range. But again, if you think that Harry Potter is a middle grade book, which middle grade by definition is aimed at children 8 to 12 years old, Harry Potter is not, that's an intense book, you know what I mean? So I think sometimes when people think books for children, they don't really think about what that really means, but books for children can have high level humor and content, and I don't think there's any problem with that.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned a platform, and at your website, it looks like you're inviting authors to send you story ideas, and actually you're paying authors that you choose to do their stories. The skill is free to listen to. Is there a business here at some point, and if so, what kind of revenue helps you make this a business that would kind of act like a business?
So when I thought to myself initially, I wonder if I could write one of these things, the first thing I did was Google, how do you make money off of these skills? Because if you can't make money, then there's no point of doing it, of course. And initially, when we started, the only way that you could monetize one of these skills was to get Amazon developer award payments that they will just pay out in their benevolence under any schedule, and you don't know when or how much you're going to get paid. So if we get that money, that's great, but we can't depend on that, obviously. They've recently announced that they're going to also allow you to sell products through your skill, which is very highly beneficial to authors, because obviously they can write one of these, then at the end of, you get through the skill, you hit the end, and then you say, hey, did you like this book or this story? Say such and such now to buy this author's, Kindle book or, audio book or whatever the case may be. So that's a way to make money. And then they also announced that you can now have a subscription-based service. So once we have enough content, we could have a service where either we have a number of books free and then you'd have to pay for additional books, or there could be pathways that you can only access if you have a subscription model. Right now they don't allow advertising, but I have a feeling that they will eventually, and then that would also be a way that we can make money.
How tough was it to create a skill?
It was both more hard and less difficult than I thought it would be. My husband and I actually met in law school, but 2 years ago he was sick of being an attorney, and he went into computer programming, which he had no background in before, but he took one of those boot camps, and now he's in computer programming. So he was able to program the whole thing, and it wasn't too difficult. We had some bumps along the road, but a lot of it was kind of just learning Amazon through its API and other technical things that I'm not competent to talk about. There are all these restrictions that you have. You cannot have scenes longer than 90 seconds. you can't have certain things here and there. So I had to rewrite the story a few times in order to fit within those restrictions. But now that we know all of that and we've done it once, it should make every other story going forward much easier.
How did you choose your narrator?
So for this first skill, I wanted to go with somebody that I knew, and my brother actually does some voice work, so it's my brother. But going forward, we'll hire different voice actors or, narrators, and obviously, depending on the skill, different voices could work better or worse for that. So I have one author right now that's writing a horror skill, like a horror story, for instance, and so you'd probably want a creepy voice for that.
Is it up at Google Play now, or is that happening in the future?
That's happening in the future. So we just got this finished because we had to have it finished for this contest, and so the next thing my husband is going to do is code it for the home, which there are now some products you can use to allow you to code it once and it will work on both, but because this was so time sensitive, we just wanted to make sure we did it the easiest way. So
I see. So he'll have to code the Google version pretty much from scratch.
Yes.
Any other differences in terms of a creative platform that you're aware of so far, writing for the Alexa versus the Google Home, and like how long the episodes can be and things like that?
That's a good question. From my understanding, Google is not as restrictive in a lot of these sorts of idiosyncratic rules, like you can't have scenes longer than 90 seconds and things like that. I think at this point, though, from a developmental perspective, Google has far less abilities to monetize, and so it makes you far less motivated to get it on Google Home. But I'm both wanting to, put this out there so that readers know about it and want to engage in this and say, hey, this is a fun thing I want to do. But I also have to sell this to authors because this is a totally new thing for them, and say, hey, this is a really great opportunity for you. If in a year's time we have 1 million users like the Magic Door does, that's putting your writing in front of 1 million new customers. And so, being available on multiple platforms is a good thing, even if they're not paying us directly, because it's, more eyeballs, or ears rather, to get our authors' content in front of.
You've written some series of blog posts, which I thought was interesting because you're passing along tips on how to write an interactive story versus a traditional story. And I could see just from reading that there are actually some kind of creative writing differences. It's almost as if you maybe knew how to write a sonnet, and now here's how you have to write a villanelle or something. But what, from a kind of a literary point of view, what do you think the biggest differences are to try to write something effective in this particular way of telling a story?
So I've had a couple of submissions so far, and I've seen some errors that come up. And then also just from me, there have been a couple of other interactive stories for on Alexa, and I've seen a number of the same problems. One is that you want there to be real choices. So if the choice is to fight the dragon or run away, you don't want to have the person say, okay, I want to fight the dragon, and then the response is, you thought about fighting him for a second, but you changed your mind and ran away. Because that makes you feel really angry when you're playing it, and that's how most of them are right now. You really only have one choice. So that's the biggest thing. But I think the other higher level thing to think about is that this is an interactive story is essentially a series of interlocking short stories. I think a lot of authors, they kind of forget about that, and they end up writing a story where at the end of it, it's like, okay, you saw a spaceship, and then you thought to call the police, and then you decided whether you should call your friend, and then you decided whether you should take a picture and put it on Instagram, and then you went on the spaceship and you met the aliens and it was fine, the end. Well, yeah, you had a number of choices, but they were all very similar to one another, and that is not a story anyone would write by itself. And so you have to think about that. And it sounds really, really complicated, but I think it's one of those things that either you're good at or not, because I didn't have that much of a problem writing one of these things. So
if you write the kind of story you're just talking about, is what's missing sort of consequences of making any particular decision in the plot, that you have some sense that the story has an arc to it as opposed to just jumping from one node to another?
Absolutely. So, I mean, that's something that I've talked a lot about, too, with authors, is that you have to remember that this is a story first. And so a story and a plot is not just a series of things happening. A plot has a beginning and a middle and an end, which means that there's rising action and then falling action. And so every, line of your story has to have that feeling to it, or it's not a story.
Well, how many different endpoints are there to the plots depending on what the reader or the listener chooses in your first story?
So I think there's technically 49 different endings, but many of them are basically the same ending. It's just you got to it through different paths, if that makes sense. There's probably about 15 very distinct endings, 20 maybe.
I think that the point that you made in one of your posts was that since the plot could be any of all of these different paths, what's consistent in the story is the premise and the characters and I think the language. I mean, there's a bit of snarkiness in this story which is enjoyable, and it's going to be consistent no matter which path the listener takes.
Right, and that's something I don't think I've written about in a blog post yet, but there's also, you have to try to keep all of the timelines consistent, so you don't want it to be that in one path something happens, and then in another path, I guess what I'm trying to say is, you only want the differences between the paths to be the choices that the person made. You don't want there to be like an explosion in one path that doesn't happen in the other, and there's no reason why that didn't happen.
Now, are you also creating ebook versions of this that will offer similar links that you get to an end of a passage, you'll tap on the screen to go one way or the other?
Yeah, so as I was making this, it dawned on me that it wouldn't be that much more difficult to make it into an ebook and a print book. And if I'm already going to all this effort of doing this, why wouldn't I do that? So it just got it up on Amazon. It's available as both a print book and an ebook. Like you said, in the ebook, you can just click on all of it'll say, do you want to turn to this scene or this scene? You click on it. In the print book, it'll say turn to whichever page. Yeah, hopefully those will kind of cross-pollinate, and people might find the book, and then on the book it'll tell them about the Alexa version and vice versa.
Were you able to make it so that if you're reading on an e-ink Kindle, the black and white Kindle, you're able to tap on the screen and go to the links? It's not just a capability of the Fire version.
No, yeah, it'll work in any version on your phone, on your Kindle, tablet. They're all links. That was a hassle, and I did the formatting myself, but it works in every version. I've tested it in multiple versions, and yes.
Do you have any sense of what it's like to travel through the story by Alexa with the voice as the medium versus reading words on a screen? Did the story pop more in the audio version, or what? How do you compare the two, same story but two very different ways of experiencing it? I
mean, I guess if you think about it, the audio version is essentially like an audiobook version of an interactive story, and so it's the same thing as listening to an audiobook. It definitely pops more. I mean, I'm sick of this story because I wrote it and then I edited it and then I had to format it and everything else. And but when I got the first audio to listen through, so that we could program it into the, to the program, it was like a new story. I was like, oh my gosh, this is actually pretty good. I kind of like it. So, because once you've read something 75 times, you hate it. So I definitely think it adds the audio.
There's a nice little intro of music when you start playing the skill on Alexa, and I imagine it's tempting, or you could imagine having sound effects through a story or music, or when the ones that you do next year, are you hoping to have a little more than just the reading of the story?
Yeah, so when I first envisioned this, I imagined there being sound effects. I imagined the characters' voices being voice acted by, different people. But then with the time constraints of this contest, there was just no way to get all of that done. And now I'm really thinking about it, and it's something that I really struggle with, how we want to do that. Because we could go in a direction that the stories are more like a radio play and are, kind of how you describe. But then that would move farther away from them being like a book. And then it would be very difficult to make them into a book version. And also it would make it harder to sell established authors on this being a platform for them to, basically let people sample some of their work. So I'm really struggling with what I want to do with that. So I feel like I've decided that, well, let's see what the feedback we get is. And if it seems like people really don't like the fact that there aren't sound effects, then, we'll go in that direction. And if people like it the way it is, then I don't see any reason to go to all that extra expense.
If you reach a certain level in the competition and become one of the finalists, is that when Amazon will make your skill available with some kind of promotion so that there'll maybe be a lot of people listening to it and they will use that information as part of selecting a winner?
Yes. So if you are selected as one of the 20 finalists and they will make that decision at the end of January, then they will be promoting all of the finalists, and they will use the number of users and the engagement, it's not just the number of users, but how long they stay engaged with their skill as part of the determination of who wins the grand prize, although that's only part of it. I mean, of course, their subjective feeling of which is the best skill will also play a role. So,
yeah, and some judges and everything.
Right.
Do you think you'll be able to tell how many people choose one fork or the other at a node? How many people want to be Prince Charming versus Cinderella or other choices?
Yeah, that's actually been really neat because the feedback that you get from Amazon, you can see which of your intents, which is the prompts, the people chose. And so I really expected, because the first choice you're given is, are you from the palace or are you from... Or do you live in a modest cottage? And I fully expected, 80% of people, wouldn't you rather live in a palace? Most people, but it's like 60-40, pick cottage. So it's been very interesting to me to see that. I think maybe because they know it's Cinderella, then it makes them think, oh, I want to be Cinderella. So, but no, we can look at that. And I've also been really heartened. We've had continue game has been a high one. Yes is a high, is like one of the top 5 intents, at which you only ever say yes when you're prompted at the end of one game, would you like to play again? Looking at the intents that people are using is very heartening and just interesting to see what people select. I
could see that as you did more of these, you'd be able to learn from actually seeing how people move through a story to make the next one more compelling.
Absolutely. So we're looking at that. Unfortunately, right now, I don't think we can see how one individual moves through it. We can only see an aggregate of data of how many people used each intent. When we only had a few users, we could kind of watch one person, but now that we have more, we can't as easily. But that's why we kind of also will just have to have people actually play it and report back to us on what they think about it.
Wow, this is fascinating. Have you made any New Year's resolutions that perhaps to balance your life between being an attorney and creating a brand new medium?
Well, yeah, so on top of being an attorney and this, my husband and I, he just got a new job, and when I started this new job about a year ago, we each have about an hour and a half commute to the same place, and we've been trying to sell our house, and it's not working, and I decided we are renting out our house if we have to. We're moving. I can't stand this 3-hour commute every day. So that's my...
Oh, man.
But you know what? I also just bought an Alexa device that you can use in your car. So now I can be working in the car.
Oh, so is that the Garmin Speak?
No, it's actually, there was a Indiegogo for a company that's making a device, for in your car, and I bought 4 of them.
Well, your starting point, mistakenly having Alexa open the magic door. I mean, that you couldn't make something like that up in terms of how much has resulted from that odd event.
I know, it's really, really cool. And the other reason I got the car thing though is I really feel like I have 2 children. I have a 2-year-old and a 6-month-old. And I really feel like in a couple of years, having these stories in the car to play with kids would be so helpful. So I'm really looking forward to this device being in more people's cars, and I think that's where the value is really going to come in.
I have been speaking with Katie Ernst, co-founder of SelectAstory.com. Thanks very much, Katie.
Thank you very much. It was great talking to you.
Turning now to content, I want to mention a new Kindle original published yesterday, December 28th. Now, in some of the description of it, it's called a Kindle single. I think they're sort of transitioning to a new term, but it's basically a shorter publication by Amazon in Kindle format. This one is titled Ricochet Joe, and the author is Dean Koontz, whose suspense thrillers have sold more than 500 million copies worldwide. Ricochet Joe is a 95-page novella that takes advantage of Kindle in motion animation and art, and I'm always interested to see what new effects people are trying with this technology. I've read Ricochet Joe. It is a powerful story of an ordinary Joe in an ordinary town who finds himself drawn into an epic and kind of paranormal battle of good and evil. As with any other Kindle original or Kindle single, Ricochet Joe is available to read for free if you subscribe to Kindle Unlimited. Otherwise, the Kindle price is $1.99. I did reach out to Amazon Publishing to see if Dean Koontz can join us on next week's show. It sounds promising. The folks are working with me to get something set up, but I won't know for sure until Monday if I am on his schedule for an interview on Wednesday. If not, I'm pretty sure you will be hearing him sometime during the next few weeks. I haven't read any of Dean Koontz's other books, so to prepare for a chat with him, I purchased The Silent Corner. That's the first in his new Jane Hawk series. It was published in June, and the second book in the series, The Whispering Room, was published on November 21st. The third title, The Crooked Staircase, is due out next year. If you are a Dean Koontz fan, please feel free to share your impressions of his work with me by Tuesday, January 2nd. That would help me out. You can email me at podchronicles@gmail.com. I look forward to talking with him about what I believe is his first creation for Amazon Publishing. Time now for some of your recent comments. I have a new cup of tea with lemon and honey, some cough drops, a spray. I have an arsenal of things to help me get to the end of the show here without calling on Nicole or Brian or maybe even Darlene. Jim Jones of Omaha replied to my curiosity about what happens when someone sends an email to jeff@amazon.com. Jim was disappointed about an order that did not arrive within the promised 2-day delivery window, so he emailed Jeff Bezos about it on December 23rd. The following day, the Sunday before Christmas, kind of impressive response time, he received the following reply. Dear Dr. Jones, my name is Craig Glisson of Amazon.com's Executive Customer Relations. Jeff Bezos received your email, and I'm responding on his behalf. I'm sorry for your recent experience with Amazon. I'd like to speak with you about your recent experience. Would you please provide the best phone number and time to reach you? I'm currently available today until 10 p.m. CST. I'd also like to know the email address on the account your order was placed. I'd like to research the issue further and see if there's anything I can do to help. I look forward to speaking with you soon. Best regards, Craig Glisson. Mr. Glisson did call Jim and said he would escalate the issue and get back to him. I think the most intriguing statement in Mr. Glisson's email is, Jeff Bezos received your email and I'm responding on his behalf. It's kind of artful language. It could mean Bezos actually forwarded Jim's email to an executive customer relations rep, perhaps with the famous Bezos question mark, efficiently indicating the CEO's personal interest in the matter. Or it could simply mean that an email from a customer in Omaha did make it into the jeff@amazon.com inbox and was plucked by Mr. Glisson for a respectful response. When I checked with Jim today, he said he has not yet heard back a second time from Mr. Glisson. I don't think that necessarily means the escalation didn't happen or was meaningless, but so far we have to say it hasn't generated a response worth stopping the presses for either. Lake Stubblehouse from the UK emailed me praise for my guest last week, Mark Jarvis of Greenwich in the UK. Lake said, well done to your guest, Mark Jarvis, for the phrase, as far as fill in the blank goes. Correctly, Lake wrote. Most people these days leave out the goes part, making the phrase meaningless. For example, as far as the weather, this Christmas was typical. Lake says he hears that error lots, but he said, in fact, mostly on your show, I hear it still used correctly, perhaps because of the mature age and erudition of your guests and listeners. Smiley face. I appreciate that, Lake, and you have succeeded in sensitizing me to a grammatical pitfall that had not been on my radar. I am a stickler for the whole comprising the parts instead of the other way around, and I try to remember my friend Kess Woodward's injunction to use gerunds properly. I'm still a little vague on what a gerund is, but I think of Kess every time I sign off the show by saying, I really appreciate your listening to my show, instead of the fairly common, I appreciate you listening to my show. It is a continuing benefit that you, my listeners of the Kindle Chronicles, are indeed an erudite lot. If you hear my tripping on one of your pet grammatical peeves, please feel free to drop me an email at podchronicles@gmail.com and set me straight. Listener Sam Hendricks, the day after Christmas, emailed a good tip if you're looking for an affordable, attractive cover for your new 7-inch Kindle Oasis. He ordered a brown Fintie, that's Finti, cover at Amazon.com. Today it's listed at $16.99. It comes in 3 solid color covers and an additional 5 covers that have attractive designs. Sam says that it makes the Oasis much easier to hold and that the Oasis is now his Kindle of choice. He especially likes the ability to choose the boldness gradient for whatever font he reads in because it makes reading on the e-ink screen easier on the eyes. So far, I have opted for Amazon's cover for the new Oasis. It's made of real leather. It feels nice. It costs $60, much more expensive. I like that it serves as a stand, but it doesn't offer protection against drops if your falling Oasis lands on the back third of the device. The Fintie cover offers better protection, but it also kind of wraps around on the front of the Oasis, and to me that breaks up the smoothness of the screen. That would protect the margins, but I wonder if it would clutter up the view a little bit. We are already seeing one benefit of the 9th generation Oasis's dropping of a cover combined with a charging battery. That was the innovative but awkward design of the original Oasis. The benefit is the proliferation of third-party covers for the new Oasis. You could get third-party covers for the original Oasis, but they didn't have the extra battery in them, so the battery life ended up being very short. In fact, Arlene bought one because she didn't like the dull look of the original Oasis cover, and she ended up going back to it because the prettier one that she bought just didn't result in enough battery life. If you have bought a new Oasis cover that you love, please let me know about it. You can email me at podchronicles@gmail.com. Last but not least, a couple of news items. We have just enough time to mention that more than 4 million customers started new Amazon Prime subscriptions in 1 week over the holidays. And I also read that the Alexa app was the #1 most downloaded app on Christmas Day for both the iTunes and the Google Play platforms. Pretty amazing indication of the number of people that were setting up their Echo devices because you have to use an app to do that. Echo Dot and the Fire TV Stick with Alexa Voice Remote were the top 2 selling products from any manufacturer at Amazon.com. In the company's quirky press release of holiday statistics, one that I enjoyed was that customers turned on their holiday lights more than 1 million times using Alexa. Well, I was one of those, and giving a voice command indoors to turn out the outside lights at our home in Cambridge on a cold night, well, that never failed to delight. I did have one Grinch-like encounter with Amazon. However, I spotted a banner ad for free 2-hour now shipping in Cambridge on Christmas Eve. I just thought I'd try it, and when I checked out, I was charged $5 for the shipping, and that was irritating. Of course, it was quickly taken care of by a call to Amazon support, but I thought it was kind of a notable flaw that Amazon would have a banner ad, and then when you checked out, you wouldn't get the promised free shipping. When I tried buying the same item, it was a plug that had some multiple outlets in it, shipped to Denver, though there wasn't a charge for the shipping. So this might have been the Grinch's antics maybe were confined to Boston. Otherwise, everything we ordered showed up on time. Many of the packages discreetly placed inside the front door via the Amazon Key coordinated lock and cloud cam. Here in Denver, Amazon Key would solve a big problem in our high-rise apartment building where each December the mailroom simply overflows with Amazon packages. If even 10% of those were delivered to our residents' units, it would really free things up in the mailroom. It'd be tough because the locks have to be uniform so that we can get into people's homes if there's an emergency or a fire or something. But still, I won't be surprised if this mode of delivery does become the norm in places like our building here over the next few years. It just makes too much sense to not to at least try it. When we left Denver for Boston in June, I didn't have the Echo show, but now I've got a show here on my desk in Denver. Of course, my parents have one in their kitchen. It's just remarkable how much closer I feel to them when I can be sitting here and I hear a little bong and there they are sitting in the kitchen. They want to talk about something, or I can do the same and drop in on them either in the kitchen or at my dad's office. I've also connected with my sister a couple of times this way. It still feels like a magical improvement in closeness to someone who's far away. I think it's the combination of the quality of the screen is high, the image is always good, the sound is good, but really it's the elimination of the friction. If you compare it with setting up a FaceTime or a Skype connection using a computer or a smartphone, you don't touch anything and you just speak, drop in on Lois or drop in on Len, and you're talking to the person and they're just appearing there. Not everyone in my family thinks it's a great idea, and I'm not forcing it on anyone, but for those of us that are connected this way, it's pretty wonderful, I have to say. Can't recommend it highly enough. That's it for this week. We might be talking to Dean Koontz next week or soon after. This is Len Edgerly for the Kindle Chronicles from downtown Denver. I really appreciate your taking the time to listen to my show. Have a great day and a Happy New Year.